T watches a scary movie. My name is T, and of course, we're talking scary movies. I appreciate y'all tuning in for another brand new episode. Remember, new episodes go up every single Wednesday night. Video version at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the YouTube page. So if you're watching this, that means you went to youtube.com/C/Theron Reynolds Scary Movie. Again, that's youtube.com/C/Theron Reynolds Scary Movie to see the video version of the show. And our audio version is available on all your favorite podcasting platforms that are out there. That goes up at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, just a little bit early from the video version. I appreciate you tuning in for your first time. Don't forget to find me on your other channels as well too. You can find me on Twitter at Axdew, that's AXDEW, and on Instagram at Theron, that's THERON _ Reynolds, REYNOLDS. And of course, you got to get to the Facebook group. If you go to the Facebook group, that's where you can find out the info on our watch parties. We always do at least one watch party a week, every Wednesday night before and after the new show comes on. We watch at least one of the movies that I'm reviewing on the show. Tonight, for example, we are going to be watching both Studio 666 and D. Snider's Strangeland as well. So if you want to see those, come on over to the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/group/T Scary Movie. Again, facebook.com/group/T Scary Movie. If you go there, you can find some written reviews, some written pieces that I've done. You can also engage some fun conversation with myself and my viewers and listeners as well too. And then you can also get the link to get to the watch party that we definitely want you to come and hang out and have fun in. So it has been a week, folks, since the last episode. It's seeming like a lot of high profile shit has gone down in the crazy world of Hollywood and horror as well. And we're not going to talk about a lot of that stuff. You know what I'm referring to, of what happened Sunday night. Of course, that Coda won Best Picture at the Oscars, and Zack Snyder's Justice League took home fan favorite moment. And look, y'all, I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. I thought that was great. It was good at the start of 2021 when we were looking for shit just to watch. And that was a really, really enjoyable watch. I'm going to miss the Snyderverse for sure. But you got to be out your fucking mind if you're going to try to sit there and act like the Justice League. It wasn't even Justice League. No, I'm sorry. It was the Speed Force. It was the Flash entering the Speed Force in Zack Snyder's Justice League. You got to be out your fucking mind if you're trying to convince me that was the fan favorite moment over anything Marvel has done, including Avengers Endgame, when you finally have everybody together ready to fight Thanos and his team, or even Spider-Man No Way Home with our 3 Spider-Mans. Like, come the fuck on, really? The Flash entering the Speed Force? Get the fuck out of here, man. There is not a chance in hell. Yeah, craziness at the Oscars, and folks were getting feisty because Malignant didn't win best film. What was up for fan favorite film? Whatever the hell it was. Is it injustice that it didn't win? Gabriel will be back throwing chairs at anybody who doesn't believe that he's the fan favorite, of course. Rather timely here that you know, this was not pre-planned by any means now, and obviously I'm trying to be sensitive, everything going on, but with us talking Studio 666 tonight, this past weekend, drummer Taylor Hawkins of the Foo Fighters tragically passed away. You know, we're not going to go into details surrounding that or anything, but very eerily timely to think that I was excited to watch this movie, excited to talk to y'all about it and discuss a lot of it, and we still are going to do that, but it's just kind of crazy to think that on a show where we're talking horror, we're reviewing horror, we're doing everything that's horror related, doing a lot of death, and you know, we have the death of somebody in a film that we're talking about, that we're watching right now, and not only that, but somebody from the Foo Fighters, which is a band that I know a lot of you, like me, grew up on. You know, that is a band that played the soundtrack of your life. And I didn't have the privilege of getting into the Foo Fighters until, you know, 99, 2000 or so, you know, around the time that Learn to Fly and everything was coming out. And then I went back and got into the older stuff, which helped also expand my love for Nirvana as well, too. And So I really do feel that since the late 90s up until now, that I really got to spend my life hearing like generational Foo Fighters songs as I got older, and each is over a different period of my life. You know, things like Everlong and My Hero. Like, I wasn't into the Foo Fighters back then, but I knew those songs at least. And growing up with those, moving on to things like Learn to Fly and The Pretender and Best of You. Times like these, like there's so many fantastic songs out there, and Taylor was there for the majority of that. You know, he's an amazing drummer that everybody in the music scene has such great respect for. You know, when he passed, all these things were going up on social media from all these other bands and artists that I know, and it's like, it's clear the impact that the Foo Fighters, but Taylor himself, have done on the music scene. This is a very well known and very well regarded and very well liked band that everybody just enjoys everything about the Foo Fighters. So it was nice to see the outpouring of love for Taylor coming out this weekend. And I, you know, folks that are much bigger Foo Fighter fans than I am. My boy Chris Palmer, who designed this wonderful backdrop that I'm using now here for the show, is a huge Foo Fighters fan. And so I know that hit him pretty hard. My good boy Travis, who's out of Washington as well, big Foo Fighters fan, and it makes sense because that's where a lot of those sounds came from. But yeah, it was interesting. Even my nephew reached out to me and asked me if I had heard about Taylor passing away, and it's like, damn, man, like it's really crazy. It's really crazy for us to start getting to that age to where we realize that time is actually a thing, and getting old is really actually a legitimate thing that's out there, and we're all going to get old at a point, and we're all going to start dealing with more and more issues and everything. And it's weird to start seeing more and more of the people that you and I grew up on, if you're in my age group. I'm 34 myself, but that I grew up on, still get close to their mortality. That shit is crazy, man. So I leave that to say that, Taylor, I am excited to discuss Studio 666 tonight. I had a really good time with it, and the music that you and the Foo Fighters have made over the past, the last 23 years that I've been into you guys and into the band, into that sound, you've helped me mature and helped me become the person I am today, because music, as much as movies and TV play such a big role in my life and everything that's made me, music has played a big role in that life as well too. I get nostalgic all the time and can think back to moments in my life and hear songs and set scenes in my mind to certain songs, and Foo Fighters are there for a lot of that. So Taylor, thank you so much for playing such a big role in my life, and let's have a great review tonight. I hope you enjoy the words I have to say about Studio 666. So to change gears, because I do want to kind of put some more focus on the social media stuff out there, because I'm having so much fun. Just joined a horror community on Twitter ran by Jed Shepard, one of the co-writers of the fantastic Shudder Zoom horror film Host. Put together a great little horror community that is like thriving like crazy in just a few days on Twitter. And we've had a lot of really good conversations on that. So that's definitely one you got to keep an eye out for if you're looking to have great fun horror conversations. A lot of cool ass people in there as well too. But a fun conversation that actually came up a week or two ago by Tommy Doyle on Twitter. That's at Tommy Doyle 47. Great guy. Love the conversation pieces he brings up on his Twitter. But he had asked if people were a fan of Predator 2. If you remember, Predator 2, second film in the Predator franchise, starring Danny Glover, and went from the jungles of like Colombia and Brazil to the inner city of America, basically in LA, in South Central LA, and the Predator involved in gang warfare. And I absolutely love that movie. Absolutely fucking love Predator 2. I actually like it more than the first one because I think there's something, maybe not relatable, but something scarier about putting this monster in an urban inner city environment and everybody just having to kind of fight their way out. Especially when you see any of the other Predator movies. Predator 2 is very, very unique with the exception of the recent The Predator. It's very, very unique in the setting of where the Predator is working at. So I love that movie. But Tommy Doyle followed that up with a tidbit which I feel I had heard. I'm not going to stand and be like, yeah, of course I knew that. But I feel like I heard it, and it also is not too crazy to think about. Brought up that Steven Seagal was very, very close to being cast over Danny Glover. And what would you think about Steven Seagal starring in Predator 2? So yeah, Steven Seagal was very close to starring in this film, and you know, Danny Glover ended up getting the role. And thinking about that, it doesn't actually sound too bad because look, I'm not out here saying that Steven Seagal is a better actor than Danny Glover. I'm not out here saying Steven Seagal is this fantastic actor. He's not. And you know what you're getting when you're watching a Steven Seagal film. But that's kind of the thing, is that doesn't stop the fact that Steven Seagal has been in some badass films in our lifetime. Like, I'm a big fan of the Under Siege series. I go back and forth to 1 and 2 any given day. They're both a lot of fun. Exit Wounds with him and DMX, that's a lot of fun as well. What is it? Hard to Kill? Hard to Kill is great. Above the Law. Like, there are so many good Steven Seagal films. Like, and they're not good because they're actually good. It's just these were the action films of back in the day. Like when you got your parents to rent you these like big, gory and brutal and messed up action films where the action stars, either Arnold or Sylvester or Steven Seagal or somebody like that, and they're getting tortured and cut up and everything. And they gotta flex those muscles and beat the shit out of all these bad guys. Absolutely love it. And let's not forget the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger did a Predator movie off that idea alone, just being this big muscly dude fighting this alien who's gonna win. So I had to think about that. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a shit movie. And I was like, wait a minute. It would basically make Predator 2 all of the fucking movies that Steven Seagal was already making. Like basically, if you saw Above the Law, that's Predator 2. Like just without the Predator in it. And I was like, damn, if you really think about that, that movie might turn out to be just as good if you really think about it now. Because that was Steven Seagal's movie. That really was his movie. Oh, he's playing a cop. And he's trying to figure out who's killing all his partners and stuff right now. And once he figures out who's trying to kill his partners, he's going to go and kill that guy. And there's another agency working against the cops. So he's got to fight them too. That's Jake Busey. It works out perfectly. Now, with the dialogue, it's not like Predator 2 is like the best in dialogue or anything. But would the dialogue be as good as it is? Probably not. Probably a little bit more one-liners in there, a little bit more macho coming out your way. And there's no doubt that Danny Glover's Harrigan, as he's presented in the finished film we see, I love him. I love that character. I love Danny Glover in it. But Steven Seagal would actually work really, really well in Predator 2, to the point to where I think I'd actually enjoy that end fight with the Predator more with Steven Seagal than I would with Danny Glover. I love everything with Danny Glover up into that. But then we understand Danny Glover's got to be smarter than the Predator, and that's kind of how he wins the fight. Whereas I think if it was Steven Seagal would have been like Arnold, and it really would have been, let's face off, man. Let's figure it out and go. I don't know if the smart disc would have ended up being used to kill that Predator with Steven Seagal in it. I really do think it would be a mirror image copy of what happened at the end of Predator. Maybe they go to La Brea tar pits. Who the fuck knows? But I actually think Predator 2 with Steven Seagal could work extremely well. What do you all think? Think back to the old Steven Seagal movies. Think back to Predator 2. Could you merge those two ideas? Could they work well? Let me know in the comments whether you think a Predator 2 with Steven Seagal could really work. Yeah, so great conversation there. Love to have more. We're going to try to feature more of those on the show moving forward as well, too. But I want to dive into the movies that we're going to be talking tonight. So, as I mentioned, first up, we're going to be discussing Studio 666. Now, this film, it's the first non-documentary film to feature the Foo Fighters. Keep in mind, they made films for, they did movies for Sonic Highways, which is the album they put out right around the time, right around 2014. And then they also put out Back and Forth back in 2010, I think it was. So they've done a couple of films before, but this was going to be the first actual, like, scripted, like, actual fictional film that they were behind. Dave Grohl wrote the story, and he also co-wrote the he co-wrote the story, or he wrote the story, but the screenplay was written by Jeff Bueller and Rebecca Hughes, directed by B.J. McDonnell, and it tells the story of the Foo Fighters trying to record their latest album, but Dave is lacking in inspiration. They're looking for something to get the sound that they need out there for their fans, and Dave decides that the best way to do it, with a little haunting, is to find like an old dilapidated house like a lot of rockers have done, get that perfect inspiration, and make the perfect album. And so they end up finding this mansion that is absolutely perfect for it. And we find out at the beginning of the film that there were a string of murders that happened in this previous home when presumably another band was trying to record their album as well too. And then we follow the Foo Fighters over the course of trying to make this awesome rock sound while trying to save their own lives as well. And that's the premise behind Studio 666. Now, I will say, coming into this film, I absolutely expected it to be more of a, kind of like a rock opera. Like, if you ever saw Repo, Darren Lynn Bousman's film, fantastic movie, by the way. But I expected it to be a lot like Repo or any other, like, horror musical. Something along those lines where we were going to get performances and we were going to get some songs in this movie. And first thing I gotta tell you out the gate is this is not that. And good or bad, I do think that allows you to focus more on the story that Studio 666 is trying to tell. Because it would have been fairly easy for Grohl and the Foo Fighters to put in any of their back catalog of songs into this, okay? They could have easily smattered in a few of their songs throughout the film, and it really wouldn't have been weird in the least bit. But I'm actually impressed by the fact they did it. Like, this actually seemed like a movie to where they said, we want to make an actual movie. Like, we actually enjoy horror. We enjoy that genre completely. We would love to make a movie, and we don't want it to be like some kind of cliche tie into an album or anything like that, which is funny considering that, considering the story of the film itself. It doesn't come off as contrived or cliche at all. It's actually a hell of a lot of fun. The Foo Fighters actually made a horror film. And the idea of this, it's kind of Shining-like, is that they go to this mansion to focus and get this album done. And as time keeps on going by, Dave just continues to delve further and further and further into madness because he has to embrace these dark desires and embrace all this madness that's going on in his head and in this house in order to get the album that the fans will just absolutely lose their shit over. And we then find out that not only is Dave Grohl actually pretty fucking hilarious, which we should long past known by now. Like, Dave Grohl is fucking fantastic. That guy is funny as shit. If you've seen any of the commercials, especially in the last few years, he's made appearances in on TV and stuff like that before. The guy is actually a decent actor. And yeah, he's one of those guys where it's hard to be like, okay, that's Dave Grohl and that can only be Dave Grohl. But if you're making a movie about the Foo Fighters, that's not a bad thing that we can only see Dave Grohl as himself. And even more so than that, the rest of the Foo Fighters, the fact that they all have these fleshed out roles in it, and that they're funny as shit as well too. You know, Taylor Hawkins is in it, Nate Mendel, Pat Schmier, Chris Shiflett, Rami Jaffe, they're all in the movie, and they all get different chances to shine. And I absolutely love that each of the different Foos got a chance to have their own character in here. You know, Taylor is just being this guy who's annoying the shit out of Dave throughout the entire story. The entire time, he's not doing anything to help the band. And as each of them slowly get more and more pissed at Dave, he is the one that's just getting goofier and goofier and goofier. Chris Shiflett has this role in the film to where all he's there to do is to go against everything the band is saying in it, and he does such a great job with it too. Every one of the Foo Fighters is actually funny as shit. And it's hard to tell, you know, is this just because you have great writers who know these guys well enough, know their humor, and they can write to that? Or is it that these guys are actually a lot better at like other kind of performing that's not performing rock songs, and they can actually act? And I think it's a combination of the two, because all 6 guys, they keep up with it. And it's not like their cast doesn't have a few other people in there that we should know. For example, Whitney Cummings, Will Forte, Jeff Garlin, Leslie Grossman, Jenna Ortega, Jiminy Simpson, John Carpenter even all play roles in this film. And while not like these roles aren't like the largest ones, I think like Whitney Cummings ends up probably having the largest featured role compared to everybody else. But even acting alongside these other folks that have been acting for a while, the Foo Fighters keep it up. And that's good, because then that allows us to properly like just immerse ourselves in everything that's going on with all the horror around us. You know, it's very clear there's some inspiration. I already mentioned The Shining before, but there's definitely inspiration coming out of The Shining, coming out of things like Evil Dead as well too. The Exorcist is a part of that in there as well. And I love that because it allows us to get some varied ways of the deaths that happen in the movie. And not only that, the movie also makes it clear, as we should already know, this is not reality. So if you're wondering, all right, well, this has probably got to turn out great for everybody because it's the Foo Fighters, and the Foo Fighters can't die, right? Watch the movie. I love that it seems like they committed fully to this and just wanted to make a really, really fun horror movie. And it is a lot of fun. It is overly gory and overly bloody at certain points, but that seems actually what they were going for with this, to the point to where I was getting flashbacks of Peter Jackson movie, Dead Alive with the Sumerian rat monkey. That film is just grossly and hilariously like gory for no reason at all. And I feel that Studio 666 tried to pull that same kind of vibe at certain points in the movie. People are getting cut in half with chainsaws. People are being grilled alive. People are being ran over. They're getting spikes through their eyes. They're getting their heads smashed in with hammers. Like, there's a lot of fun, inventive deaths in this movie, and there's heaps of blood to go along with that as well. It's really, really good for a freshman effort from the Foo Fighters putting out a horror film. And in terms of the monster itself, again, they make the smart idea to have the narrative not so much focused on what are all these monsters and demons and ghosts and things doing in this mansion, as opposed to, all right, well, clearly they are influencing members of the band, so what's the band doing with that instead of all these monsters? And I think that's the right idea, because each of these guys have the ability to come off both menacing and friendly as hell, depending on the context and the light that they're being shown in throughout this film. And it's weird because we get a musical performance of Dave Grohl singing a cover, and it contains one of the most hilarious fucking cameos I think I've ever seen. Like, it's an all-time cameo from somebody you wouldn't expect. Like, you know it after the first few seconds. You don't know the cameo's coming, but after the first few seconds, it makes sense. One of the best cameos of one of the only musical performances inside Studio 666. So good. Now, when it comes to the horror itself, there were a few times where it's like, okay, I can definitely see how that could be perceived as scary. The image of the demon and like the ghost or the demons, the spirits that are working with this demon haunting the Foos. Like, that imagery is very, very much ghastly and very much like scary. I do think that's actually on the scary side for sure. But with that, it's definitely this movie's played up more as like a black or a dark comedy in terms of the scares and the humor, more than it is a straight horror film. And I don't mean that as an insult in the least bit, because the movie, I think, does a great job with everything it tries to put across the screen itself. But I'd be lying if I said that I thought trying to scare us was the number one priority. Besides like the opening scene and maybe like one or two other ones, I don't think that was really the goal here, and that's more than okay. This definitely made me feel that this was a band that absolutely understands making something that doesn't have to be cliche. Like, they're not trying trying to make A Hard Day's Night or Yellow Submarine or anything like that. They're actually just trying to make a movie that they're in. They're using their notoriety as the Foo Fighters to make a horror film because they wanted to make a horror movie. And I think they absolutely succeeded in that aspect, 100%, to where I wouldn't mind seeing these guys do another film, honestly. I, for some reason, thought this was going to be an anthology story, you know, Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone, anything like that. For some reason, I thought that's what it was going to be, just because of all the other actors who end up in the movie. But I was pleasantly surprised to keep that one narrative throughout the entire film, let the Foo Fighters and their guest cast shine, let the scares and the death shine as well, and they did a really amazing job with this movie, y'all. Definitely one you're going to want to check out. It is available to rent right now on most of your streaming platforms, and it should actually be getting a physical release. I believe it's end of April, early May. So let's change gears now and talk about our second movie that we bundled up with Studio 666. We are talking D. Snider's Strangeland. So with Strangeland, this movie I had been seeing the cover for a while at this point. When I worked at Circuit City back in the mid-2000s, I remember seeing it on shelves all the time. And rental stores, because I worked at a Blockbuster Video for a while as well too. I absolutely remember seeing this movie, and I didn't know what to think because the cover of the film has Linda Cardellini, you might remember from Scooby-Doo and Avengers and all that good stuff. On the front, shaded in blue with her lips sewn up. And I remember I didn't see the cover of this until probably after I had seen like a couple Saw films, and so I just immediately assumed that's probably what it was. It looked like somebody was getting tortured. Who knows? Now, D. Snider's fantastic. D. Snider is absolutely fantastic. That is a guy for us, y'all. He makes fantastic music. Twisted Sister makes great albums, and I like a lot of his solo stuff as well too. He's got great fucking music taste, and he is a fan of horror. He's a big fan of horror. And so D. Snider actually wrote this script and, put the story and everything together as well too. It was directed by John Peeplow. And it's very clear what D was setting out to do here. He wanted to make a movie that could introduce some kind of new horror icon. And in D. Snider's credit, this film very much so is a great nostalgia trip for me, at least. It was produced in October of 1998, and it has very much a late 90s feel to it. Not an insult to the movie at all, but while I was watching it, I couldn't shake the fact that this is something that I would have put on at like 1 a.m. on Cinemax back in like the early 2000s, which kind of gives you an idea of a bit of the feel for it. Like, there isn't a lot of nudity in this movie, and that's not the purpose of it at all, but it kind of almost feels like a Skinamax movie that turned into a horror film to a certain extent, which, again, not an insult in the least bit. And the story tells about, again, Linda Cardellini's character, Genevieve Gage and her friend Tiana are into chatting with random people online. Remember, this is the tail end of the 90s. The internet is big and huge. And one big thing at the end of the 90s and early 2000s people were loving were chat rooms. Didn't matter what, just jump into the chat room and you start talking to somebody random. But back in the 90s, I know we still have issues now, but back in the late 90s, things were not as safe as they were these days. So the idea of meeting up with somebody, the idea of giving out a lot of that personal information, that's a scary thing back at the end of the 90s because you could end up being dead. You could end up being killed, kidnapped, whatever. So I love the fact that D. Snider told a timely tale of something that was new, that was coming out, that a lot of parents were truly worried about. And of course, what ends up happening? Genevieve and her friend Tiana end up chatting with this person named Captain Howdy, which right off the jump, being a horror fan, you could tell there's something wrong with that name. Because if you recognize the name Captain Howdy, you might know that from a little film known as The Exorcist, as that was one of the names that the demon god Pazuzu used in order to make himself more friendly to Reagan before ultimately possessing her and causing all that fun havoc that happened in The Exorcist and The Exorcist 2 and The Exorcist 3, and then Dominion, a prequel to The Exorcist, and Exorcist the Beginning, happened in all those films. And when they go to attend a party being hosted by Captain Howdy, two of them find themselves kidnapped by local serial killer and torturer Captain Howdy. Now, Captain Howdy is played by Dee Snider, who looks amazing in all of his makeup. He's got all these body modifications and piercing, these giant tattoos on his face and his chest as well, making him this very intimidating and just beastly looking figure. Somebody who, compared to a lot of the other killers at the time, we might have, a Freddy or a Chucky. This guy looks like he could actually stand up, mano a mano and take you the fuck out. And I think that was important because we're in the late 90s. And, at this point, we're in such a meta phase to where we do realize that certain horror films don't work because this person can easily run away from this person. They can overpower this killer. They could kill this killer. And so whether intentional or not, Dee Snider playing his own lead character, his own villain in this piece, works out fantastically because it becomes very, very clear that Captain Howdy is not the one to be fucked with. And one thing that's very interesting about Captain Howdy, as we find out over the course of this movie, is that he's not really killing anybody. I know that's kind of the implication here, is that this guy's been doing it to a lot of people and collecting victims and trophies and things like that. But the one thing we see over the course of this film is that Captain Howdy is about torture. Like, he's piercing all of these different victims, man and woman that he's kidnapping, and he's putting him in all this immense pain, but not many of them actually seem to die, and he didn't seem to actually be killing too many of them. So it's the weirdest thing in the world, absolute weirdest thing in the world, that that it's a horror film about all this shit happening, but no one's actually dying. It's almost like Saw in a way, to where, Jigsaw never actually killed anybody. Jigsaw put a bunch of people in traps, and then they ultimately killed or maimed themselves by going through it. He didn't really kill anybody himself, though. And that's kind of the vibe that I really got here from Strangeland. It's like, well, Captain Howdy hasn't actually murdered anybody. Like, he's hurting a lot of people. He's a bad guy that should be in jail for sure. But he hasn't actually ended anybody's life from which I can see. So over the course of this film, Genevieve's father, Mike Gage, is trying to track down Captain Howdy and arrest him and also free his daughter as well too. And the film is actually structured very interestingly enough to where Mike Gage actually succeeds at that. He actually catches Captain Howdy and arrests him and gets him in front of a judge. And the film doesn't actually do what other franchises have done in the past, to where that might be the start of the tale, that might be the end of the tale. We get a sequel, we get a prequel that really dives into that. Like, we actually kind of get to see it all play out. And it's interesting because Robert Englund is in this as well, who you might know as Freddy Krueger. And that's a big part of that story, obviously, is that Freddy Krueger was released from jail due to a technicality, and then that's when a mob murdered him, and he came back from the dead and started killing all the children of Elm Street. And the idea here of Strangeland is that the police do capture they do capture Captain Howdy, and they put him through the legal system, and he claims the insanity plea. He gets released, and due to rehab and medication, he's normal. He's trying to live a normal existence. And then Nightmare on Elm Street happens, to where a local mob, worried about what this man will do, decides to take him and put him out of his misery. Unfortunately, they don't check their work, and Captain Howdy returns to wreak more havoc upon this town. And I love that Dee Snider basically gave us like the full arc of Nightmare on Elm Street in one film, because it's not a long film. It's only 87 minutes long. That's not too long of a film at all, but yet we get to see Captain Howdy's first spree, his run-in with the law, and then him returning to seek revenge on everybody who basically fucked with them at the beginning of the film as well too. And I love that we get all that in here, because it gives us a variety of victims. It gives some nuance to Captain Howdy himself. It actually kind of puts us on Captain Howdy's side a bit too, because after he goes to rehab, he's on medication and everything, it's clear that this person could very likely live a normal life and not, do any of this terrible stuff ever again. But because everybody knows better and they just feel that he has to be put down, that is what leads to the trouble of our main characters. Now, outside of Dee Snider, The acting is it's there. Elizabeth Pena's in it, and I mean, I like what Elizabeth Pena does because she's Elizabeth Pena, and I think she's great. Robert Englund's great in it as well too. Amy Smart actually makes an appearance, and she's fun. This before she really started blowing up in that time frame as well. But the acting is nothing to write home about. I love like Brett Harrelson as Detective Steve is so good. It's like it's very interesting acting that you can't look away from. That is the best comment I could say about it, is that it's just very interesting acting that Brett Harrelson decides to commit to for this role. It's not going to win any acting roles, folks, but Dee Snider is very intimidating as Captain Howdy. He definitely seems like a killer who is equipped to fight the cops or get in a hand-to-hand fight with anybody that's dumb enough to come across him. The only thing that was weird, like I said, is the motivations, because it didn't seem like Captain Howdy was really killing anybody. Like, it's kind of like he has these ideals, maybe as a part of a cult, or he's leading a cult, and he's like doing all these body modifications to people and piercings and getting blood and skin and things like that in order to appeal those gods and appeals that thought process. And that's fine. I just wish, like, had he murdered more people, it'd be easier to get on the side of our protagonists at that point, because unfortunately, again, everything that kind of happens is kind of deserved, because he doesn't kill anybody yet. All this shit ends up going down. It's a very weird feeling, but it also works. Now, is this going to be on the same quality of a lot of our other favorites? Absolutely not. But I think that's actually what makes it better, is that I don't know if Dee Snider purposely set out to have a movie like this made, but it very much comes off like a cult classic to me, to where the production value isn't as high as you might want it to be. The kills are overly bloody, overly gory, overly gruesome, or at least the torturing. I say killer, but it's very, very lifelike as well. And I think that's really the focus of it, is to scare you and to gross you out, rather than look at this and say, oh, this is amazing film. And I think Dee Snider very much succeeds with a Strangeland. Now, it's available to rent on all your favorite streaming platforms: Prime Video, Vudu, Movies Anywhere, all that good stuff. So check that out on there. Not a bad coupling with Studio 666. And that's going to do it for us, folks. That is it for tonight's episode of T Watches a Scary Movie. We have a lot of great stuff coming up here in the coming weeks. Next week, I'm going to be taking a look at The Descent and The Cave. That's right, we got some cave-dwelling horror coming up for y'all. We're going to take a look at a couple of those. Then we're going to get back to some new stuff. We're going to hopefully be taking a look at Ty West's X and Uma. So that's what I'm hoping to get to y'all here over the next couple of weeks. But we got a movie to go watch. Get on to the Facebook group so you can get the link to the Discord to join us to watch Studio 666 and Strangeland. Those links are right over there, or just go to the Facebook group. Easier way to get in for it. But subscribe, y'all. Like and comment. Let me know what you thought about these two films if you had a chance to see them. And let me know what you want me talking about here in the future. Rest in peace, Taylor Hawkins. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.